Hey folks, so years ago I wrote this book right here. This is the only copy I've got left of it. It's the first book I ever put out, and it's a book on how to irritate people. The actual title is How to Irritate and Annoy Your Friends, Neighbors, and Co-workers Without Seeming to. And it's covered with ridiculous things on the cover. Like, that wasn't funny. Stop that. Turn off that horrendous music right now. I can't stand it when you do that. Did you hear me? All sorts of things like that. Anyways, do you always laugh like that? Anyway, so it's gotten me thinking about irritation. Irritation played a big role in my life. I guess that's not for everybody to say something like that, but I'm one of those types of guys who can really get under your skin, and it's a practiced art, and it started a long time ago, and I've been looking at how it started, and it's sort of interesting. Now, just to be clear, the principle of irritation to me is to do or say things to people, friends, family, generally speaking. You have a less chance of getting beaten up that way. And do things that get under their skin, get right into the back of the spine there, right at the bottom, where it just triggers, sort of like a, like this, a real angry moment. But to do it in such a way so that the person isn't aggravated enough to burst out and say something about it. They just take it. And the fun, I guess, if fun such as it is exists, is in having them simmer with irritation and do that as long as possible. And there's a variety of ways of doing it. And over time I developed it as an art and eventually wrote a book about it. So now at one point I worked at a restaurant, and that's where things crystallized for irritation. But realistically, before I worked at the restaurant, there were many precursors to irritation techniques specifically. So before that, they weren't a science. But I was already doing irritation stuff. Now, I don't know if you do irritation, and you'd probably scoff and say, no, I don't. I've never irritated anybody. But if you look at your life, you'll discover that maybe you do irritate people, particularly friends, family, your partner in a relationship usually is fair play, and in fact it becomes a bit of a game to do things that slightly bug the other person but aren't enough to make them explode. Now, whether you do that in good jest and good fun, or if you do that in an earnest desire to keep them simmering and anyway. For some reason, when I think about something that has somebody simmering with irritation, I find myself laughing. And I don't know what your sense of humor is about. There's some vehicles going by there. We all have a different sense of humor, I guess, but mine developed that way. You can think it back as far as you want in your life to try to figure out the origin of something. Where does it really start? How come I suddenly want to irritate people? Why do I find that funny? Some people don't. But don't worry, those are the victims, right? The people who don't find it funny, because you can get them irritated because they don't find it funny. That's the whole point. Anyway. So, yeah, I was there were 3 children, and I was the middle child in our family. And there was some tension in the family, and I did develop a sense of humor In my retrospect, I believe, I developed a sense of humor to diffuse some of the situations in the family. But it certainly wasn't just that. I was naturally funny. I saw a weird side of things, and I would express things in ways that would make people laugh. And at times I sought that out. I would do it exaggeratingly. I wasn't very smooth at it, I guess. But eventually, anyway, I became known as a funny character. A lot of my humor was self-deprecating, I guess. But I just have a creative mind, and my mind connects things in odd ways, and sometimes some of that is humorous. And an interesting aspect of my humorous viewpoint on life is that I have a lot of memories that are funny. And so when I think back about stuff, I often end up laughing like crazy. Sure, I have memories that aren't so funny, bad things. Everybody has them. But I seem to have a preponderance of humorous memories. And some of them are quite silly. And this one is probably the top of the pile. The irritation tactics in my past and how this all started. It's just crazy. But anyways, I was the center child of 3, and I developed a sense of humor. When I moved out from home, I moved out with my brother. And my brother's been there in my life as a consistent person all the time. He was always there as a protector, I guess, my older brother, 2 years older. And always there as somebody I could look to for some advice and support. And he would often... it was an interesting time at the beginning when we moved in together. And inevitably, I think TV took a role. I think our first year we lived in a house on Kent Street. And with that, we somehow managed to get some cable in there. And we watched TV there endlessly, and certainly late at night. And he and I would end up sitting there, sometimes doing a little toot along the way, so usually a little bit stoned, maybe a little drunk, and watching ridiculously boring programs. They weren't better then than they are now. But I remember in particular watching the $6 Man. We never thought he was worth $6 million. He was just a $6 man. And in particular, when you watch Dear Steve Austin and his adventures, comments will begin. And I would think that maybe that's one of the places where the irritation began for me, the roots of the irritation. Where my brother and I started a game somewhere along the way. I don't know where it came from, the actual origins of it, but I know that when we were watching the $6 Man late at night, we would ask, comment on what the show was doing, what the guy was doing, like he couldn't possibly lift that, he had a mechanical arm, he had a bionic arm. Yes, the arm was strong, but he would be lifting things that normally would rip somebody's arm off their shoulder, and the connection wasn't any stronger. The back muscles weren't any stronger. So it wasn't just the arm able to do things. It's connected to all sorts of... Anyway, you can see where the thoughts were going and all that. So we would ask these it ended up being these questions. And eventually, it became sort of this game of being wary of the questions, because questions could be endless. You could have an endless amount of questions about the show and completely miss the show, right? So, and it became an art to ask a question in a way that the person would answer the question, and answering the question was losing the game, right? So you had to always be on your guard for this question. And it became quite funny at times, and clever, really, when you start thinking about it. How do you ask questions? There's different types of questions that you can ask about a show, and you can get quite inventive about it. One of the best questions to ask is a question the person wants to answer. right? You can stroke their ego, you know. Ask a question about something they know a lot about, and they can end up just babbling for hours about that. And while they're babbling about their you can get them to answer other questions, perhaps, you know. I know it sounds totally stupid to you, I'm sure, but here I am, you know, starting to laugh about it, and just in memory of these moments of these questions. There was a moment when we were watching the movie Blade Runner, believe it or not. That's the ultimate moment where I asked a non-question, right? So I said, I actually remember it, and this is long ago, right? But I said, I don't think she says anything until the end of this movie. And I was talking about this actress, this character in the movie, an android, and I had realized that though the movie was not over by far, she doesn't say one more word in that movie. And but see, it wasn't a question; it was a statement. But in the statement, there was an implied question. Because, you know, like it's like saying, you know, some exaggerated claim about something, you know, wait a minute, that's not true. So it starts in my brother's head. He's thinking, you know, he's seen the movie too, because we'd seen all these movies before. And if you haven't seen Blade Runner, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but just go with it. Anyway, so he's thinking about it, and he's running through the scenes, you know, and he's going, and then suddenly he says, yeah, I'd have to say you're right. She did. She doesn't say anything after that, and I started laughing at that point that I had him. Because I had created this non-question question, and that was the ultimate. I'm sure it seems ultimate to you, looking at it from your perspective, but you know, to each his own, and to each their own sense of humor, and things happen at the time, and if you've been smoking a little bit, and maybe it seems funnier than it is, but I think it is funny, the concept of asking questions, because if you carry it to an extreme, right, and picture this in a cinema or a theater, and you're watching a movie, you got on with somebody to watch a movie, and you got somebody next to you who's asking, you know, excuse me, oh God, he's asking, you know, I can't even get it out anymore. It's crazy. Oh shit. You know, what kind of shoes are those? Is that a blue shirt he's wearing? Ridiculous questions. Oh God. Here I am. See, sense of humor. Oh God. I can't tell you a story of this state. I have to get back serious here. Alright, okay. So So you ask these questions, endless questions, right? Endless questions, one after the other, and it just interrupts the whole movie, right? The person is trying to enjoy their movie. Oh God, it's just ridiculous. Oh, I still have these problems. You know, I best not even get into it with people. If I start doing this stuff, you know, like I've sort of like I'm cured, you know, from doing these irritation tactics mostly. I don't really pull them on people anymore. I seem like a normal guy mostly, but it's always lying there in the background waiting to spring out again. Okay, so asking these questions was to me one of these ridiculous things that began the whole process. And then I guess I have to jump forward. There's probably a whole pile of other things that I came across that I instinctively would do. You know, just niggle at people, say comments that would bother them a little, you know, or, you know, just stuff that would confuse them, you know, just to get them trying to figure out what the hell what I'm talking about. Or there's a variety of things that I would do that I can see as these roots. But nothing was clear. These were all these like instinctual moves that I was doing without really an analysis behind it. And this is what happened at the Keg restaurant. So how did I start working there? So this is where it jumps forward to. And again, this brings a great moment for an event that happened when I got the job. And what it was, I lived with a couple of guys It was George and it was Derek. And while I lived with them, George was a waiter, and he was a partier. He just partied and partied and partied. He was always partying late at night and getting up early in the morning for his lunch shift or whatever. And he'd never have enough sleep. He was always, just barely getting it together. He had nice hair. He kept his hair really, really well combed and well manicured. I guess not manicured, but manicured, his hair. So he had a friend. At some point, he picked up this friend who his name was Cam, and Cam would come over, and he'd come over with some girls sometimes, some friend he picked up, and he worked at the restaurant, the Keg restaurant, and at the time it didn't mean anything to me. I was out of work, and I needed a job, but that really didn't enter into it at the time. But Cam was, we noticed that, or probably I noticed, that when Cam was with somebody new, particularly a girl that he wanted to get together with, he had this technique, and what it was he would ask questions. So it would, so where do you work? Do you like the work you do? Do you have any hobbies? And, he would just ask questions. He normally wouldn't do that with people, but it was noticeable at certain times that seemed to be an approach that he had. And I was already sensitized to questions, right? Sorry, I was laughing so much here, my eyes are all teared up. But yeah, he was using this as a technique, and I was already, with my brother, with these questions and whatnot, I was always aware of these questions as their tools, how you can use them for controlling a situation or irritating people. And one day, and George was his friend, my roommate, was a game player. He liked to play games all the time, any type of game. And I came up with this idea. I talked to him about Cam asking these questions, and he thought it was pretty funny. And somehow together we came up with this idea of setting a stage where we sit him down, we get him stoned, right? We do some hot knives or something, and we ask him some questions. But we really pile it on, right? And we had a plan. And at first we would each ask him one question. And, I would ask a question, George would ask one, I would ask one, George would ask one. And we'd just do this. And then we'd up the ante, and I would ask 2 questions, George would ask 2, and I would ask 2, and he would ask 2. And if that wasn't enough, we'd go to 3 questions, right? 1, 2, 3 questions, 1, 2, 3 questions. Really, really pile it on. And here we go. Okay, stay calm. Anyway, so the night in question arrives, and we take him to the stove. Hot knives are ready. Boom, 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 boom. Get him going. And we sit him down. He was sitting there, and we were sitting here. I was sitting in a chair, the rolly chair, the office chair in the living room, and George was sitting on the sofa. And he was sitting on a chair, because the sofa, the comfy chair at the corner there. And he was, pretty buzzed. And problem was I couldn't think of any questions. Of course, my brain freezes, like when we're about to start. But then I noticed he wore a baseball cap. And I said, hey, where'd you get that baseball cap? And he starts talking about the baseball cap, and he was into baseball, and the baseball thing just gave this doorway to a whole pile of questions, and it started. I was asking a question. It seemed innocent enough at the beginning. He wouldn't really doubt or question the situation, and I guess this was the point of it, is asking the way he asked these questions with these girls. We were sort of returning the favor to him, and seeing when would it come up to him that, these are just questions. It's just endless questions. No point to them. No point to answering them. Excuse me. Can't get too excited talking about this, or you won't understand me. Anyway, so he asks, so one question, you know. You know, and it was slow pace enough. He was giving answers, you know, like actual answers. You know, I went over here and I did this and I played that and I was a manager and, you know, like, you know, you use the bat this way. You know, that hurt, like good bad is, you know, whatever the questions we came up with. Anyway, and then there was 2 questions, right? 2 questions, 2 questions, 2 questions, 2 questions, and it was hard to keep a straight face asking these questions. And then we got into the 3 question. We just upped it into 3 questions each. And, you know, like when you're shooting 3 questions, you know, where did you buy those shoes? Why did you buy them? And how much did I can't even get it out. How much did they cost? You know, why all these questions? It's ridiculous. Anyway, no more. I shouldn't be talking about this. See what it does to me. Anyway, so you know, maybe this is good therapy to get this out. Maybe I'll stop laughing about it eventually. Anyway, so we've got so he's sitting there at some point, and it has devolved to just monosyllabic responses, right? He's you know, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, maybe, no, yes, you know, and he's just, and then all of a sudden he goes, stop, you know. So then it's like, why, Cam? What's the problem? That's another question, right? And he goes, no more questions, stop, you know. And he had reached his max, right? And we all burst out laughing. And anyway, I don't know how funny he found it, but I still find it funny as a source of entertainment, as you can tell. Now, through Cam, I got a job at the Keg restaurant. Now, I think I'm going to cut the video here and let you come on back to the video, the next video, where I talk about what happened, how I got into the job and everything like that. Because it's just endless. It just there's no end to these irritation tactics and what happened at the Keg restaurant. And I could take hours here, so we're going to cut it short here. I'm going to thank you for watching this little introduction to my irritation tactics, and bear with you as being my ear for this stuff, and check back in for the next one, and we'll talk about the next adventures at the Keg restaurant. See you soon.